Cool. We are away.
Perfect. All right. Great. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in. Welcome to this webinar. This is another one of our My Recent Viz webinars, which is a fairly new series of webinars as well as blog posts where we look at interesting vizes, beautiful vizes, vizes that help us answer the questions of our times. And it's my pleasure to welcome Ravi today. He will share with us one of his recent visits, and he'll talk us through it, some of the decisions he made and some of the thinking that went into this viz. First, I want to quickly introduce Ravi. He's a Tableau and Alteryx consultant with the Information Lab. The Information Lab is a Tableau partner, so we work a lot with them, both in customer accounts, but also on the web, and doing fun projects with them, and all of the colleagues there are very engaged in the community, and they contribute a lot. Ravi as well, and for that reason, he's been made a Tableau Public Ambassador, and he's been very helpful in sharing his experience in the whole community. And he's also been a graduate of the data school in the UK, so if that's something that you might be interested in, he might be able to tell you a bit about that experience at the end. And yeah, I think he loves everything to do with data and everything analytics, particularly sports data. So if you check out his Tableau Public profile, or if you're looking at his Twitter, and we can see the Twitter handle here on the screen, you'll see a lot of stuff around sports analytics. So yeah, check that out if you're interested in sports. Today we're not talking about sports. Today we're talking about politics, and it's a very timely topic. So as you know, we have the snap election coming up next month, so we're in 8 days almost. Yeah.
Very soon.
And very soon, yeah. This is actually fascinating for us. I mean, we've been observing how people visualize election data or data around elections, both before the election and then also the actual results. I mean, we had the crazy election, of course, in the US last year, but then this year it just continues with France, UK, and then we've got Germany later this year.
Germany coming up, yeah.
Yeah. So we are really interested in and kind of keeping a lookout for how people visualize data around elections. So that's how that's why we were very keen to have a look at Ravi's space as well, because we were like, wow, that's first time we've seen somebody do something like that with election data. So yeah, we were very excited when we saw that this, and we're happy to have him on this webinar. And I think we'll just pass it on to him, and then let him show us this, and then tell us about the
so we've got these.
What motivated you to build this viz, and what question did you want to answer? What questions did you have in your mind when you were thinking about the upcoming election?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just
go on.
Sorry, just to, for our listeners, so we have a bit of a structure here. We've got these points that we want to cover. We're going to go through these one by one. We're going to pause every once in a while and take questions. So if you do have any questions, please let us know. There's a chat box where you can type in your questions. I'll keep a look at the chat box. There's also a Q&A box. Please try not to use that. The chat box is a little easier to work with. Thank you. And sorry for interrupting.
No, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, the chat box is much more social as well, so you can sort of, keep chatting while I go. Yeah, so the motivation was basically that it was something that had sort of bugged me for a while, but then I saw this this bar chart that was doing the rounds on social media, especially around the time where they were trying to get as many people as possible to register to vote. And as you can see here, in the 2010 election, it was quite a close election. It resulted in what we call in the UK a hung parliament, so that there was no majority formed. So parties had to collaborate to get the majority. In this case, the Tories and the Liberal Democrats in the UK, they collaborated to get to the majority. However, as you can see, the number of people who didn't vote actually outstripped the number of people who, the chosen number of votes for each party. So, this statistic was going around that, these people are the people that didn't vote, they could change everything. So I really wanted to look into that for starters. Now, as I'm sure everyone here is aware, the hardest thing to begin with is actually finding data. So I did a lot of hardcore Googling, as I would say. So I started off with searching, voter turnout, data, UK voting database. I found myself going through, data.gov, finding different ways to see where I could find it. And eventually I went through a couple of articles and I found the Electoral Commission. So the Electoral Commission actually do some research based on electoral data, and they offer Excel and CSV files, you can see here. I mean, the visualization here isn't exactly best practice at all, but you can see here that they've actually got the number of entries to the electoral register for not only just the sort of the Brexit referendum that happened in last June, but also local council elections, mayoral elections, commissioner elections we have in the UK, as well as the general elections. Now, I wanted to focus on the general election purely for the reason of wanting to look at this topic in detail, and actually find out as much as possible as I could around, is this true? Are there specific areas that can be targeted? Which constituencies need that sort of boost? And ultimately, why aren't people voting? Is there something cultural, or is there a greater motivation? Now, just a couple of quick pieces about getting the data. So it came in these CSVs, which I'll talk about in a bit. But I just want to quickly just jump into the actual viz. Okay, so on my Tableau public profile, it's this one here. And after sort of coming up with this idea, I just created this visualization, which effectively has the question at the top. So how much does voter turnout matter? And the focus that I took on the 2010 and the 2015 elections, so the ones that are most recent. And then a quick comment about the number of people in the electorate who are registered to vote but did not exercise that right to vote. So along the top, you can see some BAN, some big ass numbers, which I've used to illustrate just, the top level figures of the number of people who turned out to vote. So I've got a key in the corner that shows, the country. So the United Kingdom is made up of England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. So each of these are different countries which make up the United Kingdom. And I wanted to see how it differed, the turnout rate in both the 2010 and 2015 elections. So Northern Ireland, you can see that it's quite a lower than average turnout. England, 65, 66 is about the same as Wales. But one thing that immediately popped out to me was Scotland here. The jump between the number of people who not only registered to, so the number of electorate, the number of people registered to vote, but also just the turnout rates of the number of the actual people who turn up and cast their ballot. Now, this could, I then got thinking, this could have actual effects, because the reason for this could be the Scottish National Party, who are pushing for the independence referendum, which had happened, I think, the previous year. And that had led to a lot of nationalistic behaviour within Scotland. And then I broke that down into regions. So within the data, they actually have these regions. I've grouped this East and Eastern, East and Eastern, two regions, which slightly changed in the 2015 data, I believe. So I grouped them together just for consistency. But here you can see what I've used is this one is the top level dimension, and then broken down by the region. And here you can see each bar representing a constituency. So Bournemouth East, Bridgend, Bath, Chippenham. And I added in these reference bands and labels to show you sort of the range. Now, you might notice that the axis doesn't actually start from 0. The reason for this was because with the sort of dot plot, or I call this maybe something like a barcode plot or a strip plot, it doesn't really make sense to start at 0 because the range of data is actually quite small, so you can't draw too much meaning and dig a bit deeper into them in that case. And I was mainly like, the first thing that drew me in was just this Manchester Central minimum of 44.3. It was something interesting where, it's why are people registering to vote but only turning out in Manchester, which is the third biggest city in the UK, which has obviously been in the news for the tragic incident in last week in the bomb attack. But what is the reason for people in the northwest and Manchester Central not turning out to vote in comparison to Westmoreland and Lonsdale? And yeah, so this was sort of the motivations behind building something like this. And immediately once I'd created it, I was able to investigate the data and analyze a bit deeper. So
the extreme, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
extreme
absolutely.
below that is actually it's dipping below 50%. So actually the majority, the absolute majority is the non-voters in these few voters.
Yeah, exactly that.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So the other thing I should mention is the thickness of the line, which isn't as visible, but the thickness is actually representing the number of constituents in each constituency. So the number of people who live in these votes. So Manchester Central is probably a big one, but it's hidden now by my reference bar. So yeah, so that was sort of the idea behind creating this sort of visualization and the sort of narrative I'd like the user to experience when going through this. So Florian, what did you think when you had a first look at this? Did it answer the questions? Were you drawn in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I noticed Scotland as you did. I didn't have as much background about the situation, but and I'm wondering if with the talk about Brexit and Scotland wanting to maybe not take part in Brexit, whether that's going to drive up participation even more. I mean, I guess across the UK, where the participation is going to go up because the political climate is such a different. So I guess those are predictions about the future, but I guess what it means is that the numbers can change quite a bit between 5 years, within 5 years, and now it's not even 5 years. Now it's a snap election, so it's just two years on, right?
Exactly.
So we see some drastic changes in some parts, but not in all. Have you looked into like any of the individual boroughs and how they've changed, or is that consistent? Is that something that was interesting for you?
Excuse me. Yeah. So let's actually hop into Tableau now and actually look into that. So when I was building and iterating through, I think a slope chart was something I definitely considered. So if we just bring that into rows, no columns, and then we put the constituency name on detail. Maybe we put the country on group, just to know which is which, and let's bring in the turnout here. Oh, there we are. So we've got a slope here, which isn't as clear as possible. So let's not include 0 here, so we get that sort of differing effect. And let's isolate this to England. Let's exclude. Oh no, keep only. Yeah, so you can start digging into a couple of constituencies, maybe even start breaking this down by county, put that on rows so you get a better view. I'm going to change this to discrete. I'll exclude the null here. So you can see a couple of them have changed quite drastically. Twickenham from 74 to 71. See if any of the lower ones have really pumped up.
So I guess that means that if you go back to the VIS, that's cool. I mean, you draw that up so quickly. So I guess that means so the overall question was how much is the turnout, but then also like how has it changed? So we do see it can change. It doesn't change everywhere necessarily, but it can change an individual consistency quite a lot.
Sure.
And they're starting from a very low level, like below 50% even for some of them. that means there's a huge potential. So it does matter a lot.
Right.
I think that's how you answer the question, right? I mean, it's this huge potential for the parties to tap into into potential voters.
Absolutely, and it sort of gives an idea of where, you know, some of the different parties might say, right, so we've got, I don't know, in the Northwest, we've got about, you know, there's a good chunk of constituencies where the people aren't signing up to vote. Let's go and investigate that. Perhaps this isn't something to do maybe in the run up to an election, but something to do when you're, you know, building up to maybe during the end of a 5-year period where you're sort of building up your armory in preparation for an election. I think that, you know, it's a good way to sort of investigate, you know, are people getting alienated with politicians, and is there sort of an issue there? To your point about the actual percentage change, I think when I was building this and I was sort of thinking about bringing in something like a slope chart, I just had a quick idea here, which I could put this on size and then do a quick table calc, do difference, and see if I can spot that here. So anything, you know, who is a 70% one? Let's look into that. But effectively, my sort of thinking there is, if I was to do something where there's a change over time, that's not really helping answer that. If we go back to this original question as how can we get these people to vote, you know, it's just looking at changing votes, whereas in this case, my focus I wanted to be looking at, you know, is there a sort of trend in constituencies where certain areas vote more than others, but also I don't want to, it was more about just raw turnout. So I guess if we're looking at maybe building out a visualization where we're looking at change, then yeah, absolutely, a slope chart would be useful, or something that shows that change over time. But in this case, because I've got the two sort of discrete columns, as it were, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. Okay, cool, awesome. I think it's a good time to pause for a second, see if there's any questions. So if you don't have any questions, please type them into the chat box. You might be able to, I don't think you can unmute yourself. Unfortunately, we can't hear anybody, but you definitely can put any questions you might have in the chat box.
Okay, let's have a look. Yeah, the chat box seems to be working. I think Koshin was, can everyone hear me? I think he was having issues, maybe that was a bit earlier. Yeah, perfect, fantastic. Yeah, any other questions that anyone has at this stage? Otherwise, obviously, keep putting away in the chat box as we discuss.
Yeah. And I guess I mean, one question that's on my mind, but I guess some other people might be interested in this as well, is we want to know how did you build that plot down there? So I love the big ass numbers, as you call them, the big numbers up there. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. But I think what really, like, what attracts the eye here, what the eye can use, really these strip plots. So I don't know, is that what you call them?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if there's a term for it. Maybe we can create a chart today as well, the strip plot.
Yeah.
So let's dig into it.
I think my colleague said they look a bit like barcodes.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely do. So yeah, so let me open a new sheet. So the first time when I was building this out, I sort of took. So I've got these groups of the country, and then I added in the counties and excluded the nulls. So when I was first building this out and I added in my year, initially I wanted to, let's ignore the year for now. I initially wanted to look at just this sort of turnout by constituency. So bring it in here. And my first idea was to do a circle plot. So something like this, where you can see sort of the spread. We'll turn down the transparency a bit to 60. And this was interesting to me. I mean, you can see the denser areas and the outliers very, very easily. But one of the things I wanted to sort of think about was bringing in these the box plot. So if I bring that in here, now a box plot didn't look attractive. I mean, it was okay. It did the job of what a box plot does. But for me, I wanted to actually build something that looked a bit, I I guess the word is sexy. Something that's visually appealing and interesting, and something that people will look at. So let's drag that off here. So I started looking at shapes, so different like circle, square. I mean, none of these really again appeal to me as much. Stars, and I thought about the Gantt bar. So if we go back to Gantt bar, so this was where I sort of started getting the idea. Hey, this actually looks pretty good. I can isolate an individual constituency, and this might look good if I was able to, as I did here, add in a reference band and a minimum and maximum. So let's bring in the color. Actually, let's make it look a bit nicer. So can I bring in country on color? Okay. I always spend a lot of time trying to figure out the color and the font at the end of every visualization, and I inevitably end up with Tableau, the Tableau book fonts that I came up with Tableau 10 because they just work really well. So let's bring in election year and make that discrete. So now we're getting somewhere. Now you can see where I'm sort of getting to this stage here. Now, the tricky part with building out the reference bands, as I bring in here, I'll need basically when you want to build a box plot that isn't really a box plot, you need each individual line. So in this case, what I needed to bring in was firstly the average line. So we want that per pane. Oh no, we want that per cell. So we can hover, drag that off, bring it in per cell. So you can see that. I formatted it so it was a bit darker, a bit thicker, not transparent. So that gives me that reference, and then I added in another line, which was not a constant line. Let's bring in the average again per cell. But instead, this time we're going to move this one, editor, and then change this to a minimum. We hover over that now and do the formatting for that. And whack up there. Cool. I think we actually made that the other one a bit bigger, didn't we? So let's thicken that line again. And finally, the same. Let's use it a different way. Let's add a reference line from down here, from right-clicking the axis, and we want to do a minimum. And then that one is also per cell, and with no label. Actually, on this one, let's add a label. So let me explain the issue I had, the first issue I came across. So I've got this label, and the line I wanted to make black and thicker. Okay, cool. So I got to this stage, and I was fairly happy with it, and I went to formatting, and I wanted to align this to the left, which I wasn't able to do. So I made this axis fixed. So I think it was like 35%. Just to help my numbers breathe a bit better. When you add a reference band, you always get this shading in the background, which I don't like, so I always drop that off. Now, this is all good and well and good. Now I want to add my maximum, and what you'll find is if I right-click Format here, I can only select. Oh, I don't actually have a label on there, so let's start off by putting a label on. Right-click, Format, we want to edit, and then we want to add a label, which is the value. Okay, cool. So in this case, we're able to show it. So I think what did I do last time? I think I did. Oh, I know why I did it. I did that. So this was absolutely fine. So it wasn't the labels that was the issue. The issue that I found was I wanted to have my 20 on this chart. Goes to sheet for the axis. Yeah. So I wanted to hide the axis and have a bigger number. So I added this. Let's finish off this part first. So we'll bring in the reference bands. So add reference line. Then we change it to band. And then we will do that again per cell, and then we don't want any banding here. Okay. So, and then I think I made this a bit lighter as well.
And I think that's
Cool.
that's incredible. That's kind of just adding that reference band. It changes the look. Like,
Right, it gives it a bit more focus, right?
Brings it together, right? Yeah, it gives it more focus. It kind of brings it, because before that it was like individual lines, but now it's like you see the span immediately, like how the difference between the minimum and the maximum. You see that immediately, and but you still have the individual data points. So this is brilliant.
Right, exactly. So, and then final touches were to get rid of zero lines and grid lines. Okay, so that was basically how I came up with this plot, and then I think I added the electron size. Oops. No, wait, no. This is there we go. Here's another problem that I found. So I went to add electron size just for context, and because it's a count bar, it just aggregates the total. So what I ended up doing is actually changing this to a shape, and then bringing in a custom shape from one of my color palettes. I've still got it here. Nope. I'll just hop across to the viz to show that one. So we go to shape, more shapes, and I've just got a line here in my KPI shape palette. So let's see if we can find it on there. Shape, more shapes, drop down, KPI. Here's my line. So select that, change that to a line, and suddenly I can bring in my electron size. And there we go. So you get that thickness back again. Okay. So this was just another touch I added. I think on reflection, the Gantt on its own actually has a bit more bold, a bit of a more bold effect, and you can see the sort of the constituencies a bit better.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. So that's I learned something there. That's a pretty cool type of visualization, and it's pretty easy to build, I guess, once you know how to do it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, this is one of the sort of challenges where we were given actually during the data school, where I think Andy now makes them as workout Wednesdays, where it was something Andy Kriegel, and he'd basically come up with a challenge like, okay, build this, but you're not allowed to show me or the analytics bin. You can't drag and drop something in. You have to build it from scratch individually, bit by bit. And that teaches you a lot, especially in terms of formatting and how far you can push Tableau. Now, I think one of the nicest things that I wax lyrical about is the fact that you can recover very fast. So through that entire demo, obviously it's hazardous doing a live demonstration, but I felt that you are able to recover quickly as you basically are able to just change things quickly on the fly and say, oh wait, no, that's not what I wanted, let's go back. Unlimited undo is one of my favorite features of Tableau. So
yeah. Awesome.
So I guess we should talk about the data a bit, right?
Yeah, let's see if there are any questions. I think we don't have that much time, but we'll see if there's any questions. And then you've mentioned the data before. If there's anything else you think that's important around the data, let's talk about that. And then maybe one thing, because you said changing things so easily, maybe one thing we should talk about as well is like if you had a bit more time to maybe if you had another weekend.
Yeah.
Change, or, like, and obviously this is not to say that it needs to be improved, but there's like always that can be done more, right? And also
absolutely,
I guess there's some trade-offs and some decisions that you made, but do you regret any of your decision? Do you think something could have been done better? And also I invite the audience if you have any ideas or suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let us know.
Sure. So just hopping back just to the data question, when I downloaded them, the way it comes through is not like this, it's like this. So I basically did a very raw copy and paste of the data from the Excel files. And then I quickly realized I actually wanted to pivot this. So the data I downloaded from the Electoral Commission website came in 2000, 2010, and it was grand totals. So I picked up the data that I wanted and put it into an Excel, and Because Tableau likes dates almost in pivoted format, I was able to do this in Tableau itself, but I've actually just done a quick example in, oh, not in here. If I go back to the Excel, right click, so here, pivoted, just to demonstrate, like, the only things I changed in this case was the fact that we just changed the name and the value as Tableau renames them when you pivot the data, to just have this sort of 2000, 2010, 2015 sort of view. And then I actually did eventually just delete the 2000s from my data source because I wasn't too interested in, but again, I think this is a nice segue into the hindsight point. And yeah, maybe in the future, or if I'd done this again, I should have included the 2000 and 2000, I think, 6 selections, just for a bit more context and way to look around how this has changed, how it's changing. And I think there's quite a nice example of John Byrne Murdoch of the Financial Times, which I'll quickly flash up in a bit. But one of the main things that I had reflections on after publishing was, firstly, the title. I mean, my title is Voter Turnout, How Much Does It Matter? But in reality, what is this visualization doing to answer that specific question? Well, not much, because it's not telling me how much it matters. It's not telling me why I should be focusing on certain areas. It's just saying, does it matter or not? And honestly, if I'm very brutally honest with myself, the visualization doesn't answer that question. However, this subtitle, I think maybe is a saving grace in that aspect. So looking at how it has changed between the elections, and I think maybe I'd add in another layer and sort of question the constituencies who aren't exercising their right to vote, even though they are registered. The other thing actually was one that Jade pointed out when she was looking through this, Jade from Tableau Public, was it's not really logical to look at the big ass numbers in this sort of order. So you've got the number of electorate and the number of votes and then look, if you think about percentages, which I am in this case, in terms of turnout, it doesn't really logically compute in your head when you're reading left to right to think, wait, why is the number in electorate bigger than the number of votes when it's 64% turnout?
Right.
Yeah,
so the ratio together. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's maybe a small subtle thing. Another thing that I noticed was just using maybe two decimal places across the board. I don't know if it added something, whether it took away from the values, but yeah, that was a small thing that I noticed. But I mean, overall, I'm quite happy with it. The final thing that I sort of in my head was thinking about, actually, when I was going through explaining the viz, was there's no way of me, as a constituent of Ipswich, to find Ipswich on here. So I couldn't hover and find it.
Yeah.
But if I'd add in, maybe if I'd said, right, let me add a highlighter on constituency name. Let me just move this blank. Let's make that hovering. Drop that out of the container. And maybe I'll just put this as a floating box here for now. You know, adding this in, I would really add to, like, go find your people. Right, so here's Ipswich with 62%. And 65%. So it's about average, or maybe below average, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think this would have added a bit more. That's the only final thing that I could think of. What do you think, Florian?
Yeah, no, sounds good, and you've added it with 2 clicks. So
yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
The one other thing I was thinking about is the colors. Was that a deliberate choice, or you just?
Yeah. So I'm not really.
The countries all have similar flags, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if
the sort of dark blue, so that's correct. Northern Ireland's the green.
Ireland's green. Yeah. Wales is a dragon. It's red. And then yeah, it was just the blue that I was just like, well, I can really just put red and white, or white wouldn't really work. I mean, maybe white would work in this case. I don't know. Let's have a look. Let's have a try. Yeah, and I like the fact that Tableau actually doesn't let you choose white. You have to like create it yourself, because obviously it's not best practice to have a white thing. No, it doesn't look good, does it? I think that was a wise choice. Something like that. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, if I do it again, I think I'd amend the title a bit, maybe add a bit more interactivity around the constituencies so people can find their own. And yeah, I guess logically change this ratio around so it's number of votes and then number of electorate in the electorate.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that sounds good. Let's have another look at the chat box and then we'll wrap it off.
Oh, there's something in here from Pavani. So how is your thought process in coming up with the viz? Does data drive the chart type or do you have a chart type in mind? Excellent question, really good question. So I did a talk last summer for the Tableau Fringe Festival about the beauty of iteration, how Tableau makes it so easy to just try different things, fail, and say, okay, that's rubbish, I'm not doing that. Yeah, so I went in with my question in mind where I wanted to investigate, how much has voter turnout changed. So I sort of started off with, okay, let's look at the electorate and the non-participants. Let's do a shared access there. So if we do electorate, non-participants, one axis, there we are. Oh, that's not worked. One axis, that's not worked either. Electorate, command, non-participants, show me. That's not worked. Basically, I create like a stacked bar to see like a ratio. Electorate, one more time. Actually, measure values might just be easier. I just take out what I don't need. Oops. And put that in color, and then we put that on the country. And measure values we want it as this and not here. Okay, so, oops, what was our color? Ah, they're the same color. Let's make that orange. Cool. So this gives me a sort of idea of proportions of like the size. So first I thought about what proportion of people. So then I created the calculated field and started digging a bit deeper that way. Other ways I do it is just trying different things. So like I was showing with the slope chart earlier, just building something very simple and just seeing how things change across the years. Yeah, just dragging and dropping things is how I start normally. And then from then onwards, it's a case of, okay, but what do I want to know? What is the key questions that I want to answer? How am I going to design my my visualization to best serve the needs? And in this case, actually, it was a case that I wanted to try this chart. So one of my colleagues had created something using reference bands earlier in the week, and I thought that having reference bands with a min, maximum, and average might look pretty cool. So I wanted to try something there. With the reference numbers, I always think I'm a big fan of these reference numbers, like these marks, big cards, big ass numbers, just because I think they add a bit more context, and it's a nice way to give a summary at the start before delving into the visualization. But yeah, I think it really depends. I think I'm going to use the Cock-Reeve example of, it really depends on the visualization and the purpose that I'm building this visualization for, and whether I've got something in mind that I've sketched out or envisioned and want to just try. Sometimes it works, often it doesn't. And it's a trial and error process, mainly for me. I hope that helps answer your question. I think I went on a meandering chat. Yeah, no worries.
That makes sense.
How do you approach it then, Florian? What's your approach to building a viz?
I think you mentioned both of them, but I think there are two distinct ways, and sometimes it's a mix of them. But one is, you have a question, you're curious about it. I don't know. You read something in the news. You read, like you said, you read something in the news that voter turnout is very low, and then you're like, oh wait, I wanna see if that's true. I want to see why is that. So you have some questions, and then you start. Maybe you have a hypothesis, and you start, to investigate that. The other way is you come across an interesting data set, and you just you don't even know what's in there, and then that's especially where that whole iterative process of playing around with it becomes very important. And then you first have to see if there even some interesting question in the data. So that's kind of like and sometimes that it's a bit of both. Sometimes it's iterative, and then I think what I always say is I see what are the interesting things that I want to compare to answer that question, and then the next thing is how can I highlight those comparisons, and how can I make those comparisons visible. That's kind of for me my mental framework that I use.
I think that's a nice sort of pivot into Tableau Public, and the fact that you can just, if you see an interesting visualization or chart type, you can download it, pick it apart, and then try something out, right? You can try a different chart type and see exactly how it was built and the anatomy behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Awesome. Do you see any questions in the chat box? So I don't have access to all the questions in the chat box, but if you
I think they may have sent it privately for some reason. I know that was just the one from Pavani. Yeah.
One more, you said?
No, that was just the one.
Oh, just one. That was the last one. Okay, great. All right, then. If there are no more questions, maybe we can share the slide with the email address one more time, so we let people.
Yeah, sure.
Give people the opportunity to answer any questions they might have later on. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. This was really interesting. I loved seeing how you. Yeah, it's amazing how fast you are with Tableau. So I'm amazed, inspired to look at the next visualization as well. I definitely learned something. So I guess everybody took away something. So thanks so much for your time, and thank you everybody for joining.